Hello everyone, this is Professor Reimer. This video is for my world history class on Friday, March 26th and Tuesday, March 30th. This is entitled Unit 8, DOL 3, the Second Industrial Revolution. Our objective in this lesson is to explain the significant contributions of scientists and inventors of the industrial age by creating an illustrated timeline. And as always, before we get to the information, let's begin with a preview. Here we see two kinds of maps. One of industrialization of Europe by 1913, which we've been talking about for the last two lessons, industrialization. And then we see the population density of Europe in 1900. So why did industrialization affect the populations of European cities? Pause the video, go back and maybe look at your notes from last time, write an answer, come back, see how close you get to my answer. Pause it now. Okay, remember, industrialization is new power sources powering machines that lead to a dramatic explosion of goods. Those machines were primarily housed in factories. Those factories were primarily housed in cities, or cities grew around the factories. The factories drew the people into the city. So there's that link between industrialization and cities. All right. Today we're talking about what's known as the second industrial revolution, which late 19th, early 20th century you're gonna see a new shift in an energy source, and also a new interest or a new focus on chemistry, and as before, a dramatic increase in new inventions, especially when it comes to transportation and communications, as we'll see. All right. Also, new or increased use of a metal called steel. Thanks to the Bessemer process, steel can now be made efficiently, most importantly, cheaply. So now you can make lighter, smaller, faster machines. You can also make taller, stronger buildings such as skyscrapers. All right. In the second industrial revolution, you also see the invention of electricity, which gives birth to new inventions, lighting, banishing the darkness, the telephone, streetcars, the internal combustion engine is invented. Industrial production grows thanks to the assembly line and mass production. All of these things we'll be talking about later on. And Europe increasingly becomes divided into two economic zones. So there's the industrial areas, which I'll show you on a map, and the agricultural areas. So let's get into some of those key inventions of the second industrial revolution. Hopefully you're using the note-taking guide that I included with this lesson, and you're gathering information to make an illustrated timeline of what you consider to be the key invention. So 1855, just to give you some context, Civil War begins in the United States in 1861, so just a few years before that Bessemer process, like I said, stronger frameworks for larger buildings, stronger rails for railroad tracks. In the 1860s, electric generator, reliable flow of electricity. So electricity increasingly becomes the energy source to run the machines, and away from that steam power and toward electrical power. In the 1870s, the first incandescent light bulb is invented by Thomas Edison, telephone by Alexander Graham Bell. This is going to dramatically change work, right? And you can now work around the clock, and you can now communicate much more quickly across regions. And there is Mr. Edison standing next to his replica of the first successful incandescent lamp. I mean, hopefully that's not like a life-size version. That thing is gigantic. And there's Alexander Graham Bell opening the first long-distance telephone line. He, with the help of mechanic Thomas Watson, devised the apparatus for transporting sound electronically. Also, in the second industrial revolution, invention of the airplane by the Wright brothers, which increased the speed of travel, movement of goods. 1909, we haven't really talked about this much, but the creation of synthetic ammonia helps increase crop yields from the use of chemical fertilizers. So there's a revolution going on in agriculture at this time as these new power sources are being used to harvest crops, whether you had the mechanical reaper, the tractor, the steel plow. The use of fertilizers are going to dramatically increase crop yields, which is going to help um, feed this growing population. In 1913, Henry Ford, creator of the or founder of the Ford Motor Company, pioneers the assembly line. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. That is going to increase um, the efficiency of the mass production of goods, reducing the prices, making them more cheap or making them cheaper, and leading to an increase in sales. Um, Also, not in that slide, but the invention of the internal combustion engine helps fuel both the creation of the auto industry and then the airplane industry. Here's an example or a photograph of the first car, right, with an internal combustion engine. Carl Benz, Mercedes-Benz, sound familiar? Yep, that's the guy. And there is the first manned flight. Orville Wright flying his glider Kitty Hawk in 1903. And there is an example of the assembly line. So the key idea of the assembly line is that each worker was only responsible for one section of the production, right? I don't know, screwing on the screws of the wheel, for example. I'm not sure what those workers are doing there on the left. But once that one worker finishes his one task, car moves down the line, and new car comes. He does that same task once again, and so on and so forth. And so cars could be, produced in a matter of, I think, hours, if not days, as opposed to one worker building the entire car from scratch, which in the early days, that's how it was done. The assembly line is still used today, though it's far more automated, meaning it uses machines, but workers are still working on those assembly lines. There's you see an example of a Hyundai motor manufacturing plant in Alabama. All right. Also, as part of the second industrial revolution, are some key advancements in chemistry and physics that are going to bolster this confidence that the secrets of nature would be revealed. They're building on the work of scientists in the scientific revolution, but they're also going to sort of redefine. They're going to, have to make some adjustments to what's known as Newtonian physics, because Einstein is going to discover something really radical happening at the subatomic level that is not happening at in this physical world. Anyway, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself. So 1894, 1898, chemist William Ramsay, as you see him there in his laboratory, discovers elements argon, helium, neon, xenon, and krypton. And in other words, there are these rare gases in the air, and these rare gases are going to be used for the production of new kinds of goods. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen discovers X-rays, and the idea, or his work, shows that the atom was more complex than previously thought. Remember, people didn't really know what's going on inside the atom. Now, with his discoveries of X-rays and the idea that certain substances emit X-rays, it's revolutionary. It's reimagining this world at a subatomic level. There you see the very first X-ray of his wife's hand. All right, 1900, Ernest Rutherford discovers alpha, beta, and gamma rays in radioactive atoms. Why is this important? Lays the modern foundation, the foundation of the modern understanding of the atom. That what you're learning in chemistry, most of you this year, right? That understanding of the atom is only about 120 years old. And then in 1900, Max Planck formulates the quantum theory that energy consists of individual particles. Then in 1905, Einstein proposes or formulates a special theory of relativity, that distance and time are relative depending on the observer. So these are massive, massive advancements in chemistry, in physics, and they're going to have impacts on the kinds of products that are going to be produced. Finally, let's talk about Marie Curie, who, with her husband, Pierre, were two forerunners in unraveling the mysteries of the atom. She and her husband studied this pitch bend and led them to discover two radioactive elements. She receives a Nobel Prize, as you see there, for discovering radioactivity. She's the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and in 1911, she receives it in chemistry for isolating pure radium, and becomes also the first woman to teach at the Sorbonne in Paris. The United States also is a key player in this second industrial revolution, as its economy is shifting to an industrial one. Remember, industrial one, use of machines powered by new sources of energy, steam power, electric power, to mass produce goods. That's what we mean by industrialization. It's fueling urbanization as cities growing up around factories, and people are flocking to those cities to work in those factories. American steel and iron production come best in the world. In fact, by 1900, the United States is the number one industrial producer in the world. However, it's a time of dramatic increases in income inequality, as 9% of Americans owned 71% of the country's wealth. And we talked a little bit in the previous lesson about the rise of socialism as a what's the word I'm looking for? A means to alleviate some of the problems of capitalism and this industrialization. It doesn't really happen in the United States for a number of reasons. Historians argue about it, but it mostly has to do with this just flood of workers coming into the United States, either from the rural areas or from overseas, from Europe. And so this large supply of workers is always thwarting the efforts of unions to make demands. Anyway, off topic, or getting off topic. So there you see New York City in the 1870s, and the examples of these new inventions. Right there is a steamboat in the river, a skyscraper being built with steel made more available thanks to the Bessemer process. You see factories all throughout the cities, high density. All of these are effect of this second industrial revolution. All right, we're talking a while about the second industrial revolution. Let's pause. Let's check to see you were paying attention, taking good notes. Look back over your notes. What innovations opened up new industrial frontiers in the second industrial revolution? Pause the video, come back for the answer. All right. Hopefully you didn't put A. A might have been tempting, but those innovations are primarily of the first industrial revolution that's happening late 18th, early 19th century. Remember, the second industrialization is late 19th, early 20th century. Answer here, C. Radios, telephones, light bulbs, and telegraphs. It's not D. D is also very, very enticing, but petroleum does not open up new industrial frontiers until much later in the 20th century. All right. Remember, in this lesson, we are explaining the significant contributions of scientists and inventors. That's what we spent most of the time just now as we are working toward creating an illustrated timeline. I want to, before we get to that, let's spend a little bit of time looking at some of these effects in Europe of this second industrial revolution. See there a map of some of those key areas of industrial concentration, primarily in Western Europe. So areas of France, Belgium, the Netherlands, parts of the German Empire, northern Switzerland, and a little bit here in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and of course in the United Kingdom. Most of the rest of these places are still rural and agricultural. But in those cities, right, you start to see some major changes. Most notably, standard living rises. Europeans have more disposable income, and they are able to have access to more products, but poverty is still widespread. Though you start to see, and we talked about this in the first lesson, the creation of new classes, right? So you have the bourgeoisie, the wealthy business people, the capitalists, the owners of the factories, as well as the landed aristocracy. So now you have two groups of elites: the old property owners of the owners of the large estates, but also now wealthy business people. They make up the upper class. There's this new middle class of the people who help make the factories or make these new businesses work, though they're not actually working with their hands in the factory. So I'm talking about these professionals, the managers of the factories, also the bookkeepers, the salespeople, the lawyers that are handling the legal needs of the factory owners. So this growth of people working in these jobs just blows up in the second industrial revolution. Though the working classes still make up about 80% of your population. So we're talking about the workers in the factories, workers in the mines that are producing the goods. Also, another key effect of the second industrial revolution is that there's a rise of leisure, shorter work weeks, and new forms of mass leisure, amusement parks and dance halls, organized team sports come into popularity. So I'm a big fan of English Premier League football, soccer, and almost all of the clubs in that league have or date their foundings to the 1880s, 1890s, early 20th century. No coincidence, because now people have the income and the time to go and watch people play sport for a living. They also have time to go on some vacations, and they have the means to do that. All that is a result of the second industrial revolution. You see there, popular tourist destination of Blackpool on the western coast. Look, Ferris wheel, boardwalk. And in this new urban environment, right, people are flooding in to find work in the factory. It creates enormous sanitation problems, enormous density problems, disease, and in cities have to clean it up with series of dams, reservoirs, sewage systems, all to address this dramatic increase in population density, which you see here on this map, right? So population density corresponds to those areas of industrialization. Education begins to change. It becomes to be more available to people, promoted by the government, as an educated worker is needed to work increasingly in these roles, especially in that middle class. So this demand for skilled workers, right, is a cause that Western governments or leads to Western governments committing to public education. Like, we need the people working in our factories to have some basic understanding of math and science. They need to be able to communicate with other people, so they need to all speak the same language. And we'd really like them to participate in our democratic society, and we would really like to teach them, right, the values of our society, and instill in them patriotism. If all that sounds like what we do in school, like back when we could go to school in person, yeah, it was on purpose, right? Schools with their bells and their traditions of saying the pledge, and the courses that we offer, all of those have their roots in the second industrial revolution. All right, let's end talking about women's experiences of the second industrial revolution. It provides new job opportunities for women. Women could now find work as secretaries, typists, sales clerks, though marriage and caring for a family, especially for middle class women, remain the principal option. Some seek property, educational, occupational, and political rights, and a few begin to organize, especially in the United States and Great Britain, for suffrage, this right to vote. You see here This is primarily what lower class women did as far as work, as domestics, they were called, working in the homes of the middle class and the upper class with the cooking and the gardening, etc. But let's end with the suffragettes, right? So you see here from 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Declaration of Sentiments demanding political equality and voting rights. I'm not going to read those. I'll let you read those. But you see, the idea is as women are granted and win uh, greater educational opportunities and employment opportunities, they began to demand, fight for greater political opportunities, including this woman, Emmeline, and her daughters, Christabel and Adela Pankhurst, founded the Women's Social and Political Union in 1903. They would pelt government officials with eggs, chain themselves to lampposts, smash department store windows to call attention to their demands, and they demanded above all the right to vote, which they won in the 1920s. All right, were you paying attention? Which of the following caused both migration to the cities and higher survival rates of city dwellers? Pause the video, look back over your notes, come back for the answer. All right, did you say A? Good work, right? Factories are drawing in, it's causing this huge density, and the pollution from the factories is causing problems that cities solve with increased attention on public sanitation, public sewers, public water supplies, etc. All right, this was the second industrial revolution. Our goal was to analyze and explain the significant contributions of scientists and inventors by creating an illustrated timeline. Now let's talk about that illustrated timeline. So here are the instructions. You to create a timeline with the seven most important inventions of the Industrial Revolution. We've done a timeline before, back when we did the end of the Middle Ages, right? So, like before, the entries must be placed in chronological order, must include the year it was invented, must include, probably most important here, a one-sentence summary of the consequences, the effects, the impact of the invention, and then a symbol or illustration of the invention. Now, last time I got a variety of different forms. Some people hand drew it. Some people did it in a Word file. I thought the best medium to do this was actually in a Google slide. So let me show you how that might look like. Here's an example. All right, different prompt. Create a timeline with the 7 most important inventions of the 2000s. So this is a sample. Don't do this one. But I'm just going to show you how you could do it in Google Slides. So you can make one slide per invention in chronological order. So for example, 2000, the GPS for the public, that's the title, that's the invention. It's not really a new invention, but it's an invention now newly available to everyday use. And then here's my one-sentence summary. The elimination of the restrictions on the availability of GPS has allowed the growth of consumer products using the technology, and you see there an example of Google Maps, which uses GPS, which is a series of satellites launched and operated by the government. This is made available to the public in 2000. There's my slide. This is how you could organize your information on your own timeline. And then one more example, right? So chronological order, now 2000, 2007. 2007, the iPhone is invented. It revolutionized communications by allowing users to easily connect with others on the World Wide Web. That's its impact. There's a picture of it. Those are just 2 slides, and on yours you need to make 7. That was my example of how you could make your timeline. You could also hand draw it, do it on a Google Doc. I leave it up to you, but this is what it must have. All right. I think that was it. Got questions? See me in our Google meeting. If not, I'll see you next time.